Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Pluralsight's Chief Marketing Officer, Heather Zynczak.
Good morning. I couldn't be more excited to be here. And I have to be honest with you, I'm just getting to know Mark, and we've had a lot of conversations, and I've never heard that story about his family and his grandparents. And that was so unbelievably inspiring, and what a great way to start the day. So I'm Heather Zynczak. I've spent the last 25 years working in tech. I started out my career as a developer, and then I worked my way through different product management and product leadership positions in Silicon Valley, at some of Silicon Valley's largest companies and some of their smallest. And then I moved over about 12 years ago to marketing. Don't hold it against me. Started out in product marketing, and then moved on into marketing roles. And I've been working here in the beautiful Silicon Slopes for the last 10 years. And I'd like to share with you today a few of the insights I've gathered along the way. So first, we're living in a time of disruption. Industries are massively changing. Think about it. Think about the taxi and ride industry with the Uber and Lyft, the hotel industry with Airbnb. And how is this all happening with this massive disruption underway? It's through technology. Just think about the advances that have happened recently in technology, and maybe not so recently. How many of you, so I recently bought my son a phone, and it made me think back to my experience of being on the phone as a kid. So how many of you remember that really long cord in the kitchen phone that you could walk around the kitchen with? Anybody remember that? Okay, thank God, not everybody. There's a few people almost as old as me. I remember as a kid, when I was on my first phone calls, my big concern was, how do I not get wrapped around in the cord as I walked around the kitchen? My son's big concern was, did he have enough memory for all of his videos, and was the cellular going to be strong enough to stream? Very, very different in terms of technology from 20 some odd years ago to today. And that technology is what's fueling this disruption. In fact, this disruption is so significant that companies are massively experiencing change. I love this statistic. In 1955, only 12% of the companies that were on the Fortune 500 are still on it today. 88% of those companies in just 60 years went away. They either got acquired, they became small, or they failed. It's Darwinism at its best. And the companies that are surviving and thriving and taking those company spots on the Fortune 500 is because they're using technology as their competitive advantage. So let's talk a little bit about the biggest disruptor ever, I think. It's probably the best example of someone disrupting a space, Amazon. So I actually love books. And truthfully, I love bookstores. I've spent afternoons at the Strand in New York City just getting lost in what books I could read. The same thing with Powell's in Portland. I don't know if any of you guys have been to those bookstores, but I love bookstores. And I swore, oh good, I see a hand out there, thank you. I swore in the 1990s that I was never going to buy a book online. And sure enough, I did. And I remember when I bought my first book on Amazon. Anybody else remember when they, or maybe your parents, bought your first book online on Amazon? Anyone? Okay, so a couple people remember. And now, I won't even read a book unless it's on my Kindle because I love that experience so much better than books. It works for me better. I can take it on planes. I can read it at night and not bother my husband with having the light on. So Amazon transformed and disrupted me in something that I had a love for. But they didn't stop there. I was recently speaking with Karen Ann Terrell, the former CIO of Walmart, and she was talking about what it was like to have Amazon disrupt them and the whole entire retail space, and what it was like to compete with a competitor that used technology for innovation, and how earth-shaking changing it was for Walmart. But Amazon didn't stop there. If somebody would have told me in the 1990s as I was buying my first book that this online bookstore would be the dominant player in one of the largest technology spaces over Microsoft and a company like Google in web services, I wouldn't have believed them. Amazon is a great example of a company that has used technology to disrupt. In fact, companies that are thriving and surviving, their technology strategy is their corporate strategy. So this seems easy. Why isn't everyone doing it? Well, of course you have to have amazing vision. But in order for that vision to be executed on, you have to have skills. And there is a shortage of skills today. There is a massive skills gap. So even if you have the innovative ideas as a company and you have the vision, the skills gap is going to keep you from achieving that if you don't have the talent in-house to take it on. Let's talk a little bit about this skills gap. In fact, in the US alone, there are 500,000 jobs today unfilled because we don't have enough skilled workers. And by 2020, they're predicting that there will be 40 million jobs globally that will go unfilled. This is a loss of productivity. In fact, it's estimated that the US economy is losing $1 trillion annually because we don't have the people and the skills to bring about the innovation we want. And tech leaders recognize this. In fact, 80% of CEOs cite the availability of skills as one of their top concerns. And 65% of tech leaders report a skills shortage just in 2016. So I want to talk about where those skills live. So how many people in the room do not live and work in Silicon Valley? Okay, the vast, vast majority. This 1 million figure, there's 1 million engineers estimated in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. We have a massive amount of skills congregating into the Mecca. Obviously, there's other amazing engineers and talent outside of Silicon Valley, but we have a large percentage of this very scarce resource congregating there. And I don't know if you read the recent Economist, but it was fascinating. There's a cover story of like a week ago, and it said, even though there's this massive set of skills in Silicon Valley, the venture capital money from Silicon Valley in 2013, only 50% of it went outside Silicon Valley. Just in 5 years, in 2018, 62% of the Silicon Valley money is going to tech firms outside of Silicon Valley. That's good news for all of you that raised your hand. And in fact, when you think about unicorns, this is even more interesting. 5 years ago, 41% of the unicorns, the private companies that are worth more than $1 billion in the tech space, 41% of them were in Silicon Valley. Today, a mere 16%. 84% of the unicorns are in other markets. They're in your markets, those of you that raised your hands. So we have the money and the big and growing firms and the successes outside of Silicon Valley, and we have this massive amount of engineers in Silicon Valley. That is further contributing to the skills shortage. So what does this mean for you? How many of you are a tech leader, meaning you manage teams? Okay, a good chunk. How many of you are rock star developers? You own your own destiny, you're every day deep in it. Well, you can be a rock star. Go ahead, give yourself credit for rock star. Okay, so you guys are the disruption. You're fueling these new markets. You are the heroes of how this competitive advantage is coming out. And tech skills are the superpower. So how do you do this? What does all of this mean for you? Let's talk about you for a minute. So first, tech leaders. You have to build and retain teams. This is expensive. If you went out and hired the absolute best engineers from all the companies in your area, and you recruited the top engineers out of Stanford and MIT and BYU and the University of Utah and every great campus that has the top engineers, it would be really, really expensive. And you know what? In 2 years, that money would not be well spent because tech skills change. When I was a developer 25 years ago, I think there was like 3 programming languages. I learned COBOL and C. I'm not so old that I knew Fortran. But now, today, there's over 250 programming languages. And you know what? Those programming languages are changing. I think Angular last year had 8 releases. So if you spent all this money and had all these amazing engineers, let's say you had a free sushi bar that rivaled Google, and you had free healthcare for everyone, and maybe you even gave away lightsabers, and I mean real ones. Can you tell I have sons? So I'm like thinking of what would entail a younger person right out of college to want to come work there. Suppose you did all of that. 2 years from now, those people's skills will be obsolete unless you invested in them. So what do you need to do? You need to create a culture of learning. Because all of the people currently at your company and those that you're going to hire, you have to invest in. So I'm going to give you 3 quick tips on how to do that. Number 1, invest in learning. Again, when I was talking to Karen Ann, who is the former CIO of Walmart, and she's now the CTO of GSK, which is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, she has a significant budget. It's in the tens of thousands for each developer on her team for training and for learning and to advance their skills. Now, she works at a big company, and some of you may be at smaller ones, and you might not be able to have thousands of dollars per developer, but you can set aside time. Maybe it's an hour a week that everyone has to do learning to stay up to date. You also can reward people. Make it part of their performance reviews. How much training did you do this last year? What new skills have you acquired? I also recommend you create a place that is safe to fail. I'm going to give you a quick example. There was, at Pluralsight, there's a woman who was an assistant. She was an executive assistant. But she really wanted to be a developer. She went out and took classes and courses and training at night. And then she came back and said, I want to try this. And the team, to their credit, let her try small projects. It was okay to fail, to try something new. And now she's honestly one of our top AEM developers. And no, I'm not going to tell your name because I don't want any of you to steal her, back to this whole skill shortage thing. But we wouldn't have found this brilliance in our organization if we hadn't created an environment that it was okay to fail. And the third advice is lead by example. So if you're not brushing up on your tech skills, if you're not dedicating time to training, your team isn't going to either. One customer at Pluralsight sets aside Pizza Fridays. And he brings in pizza every Friday for lunch, and the team sits down for an hour or 2 and watches a course. They watch a training course together, and I'll get up to date on the latest skill. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the developers. Those of you that raised your hands for rockstar developers, you could just be a developer too, you don't have to be a rockstar. You are the future, so invest in yourself. Make sure that your superhero powers are always cutting edge. Spend time every week staying up to date. Make learning a priority. And you know what? The second piece of advice is assess your capabilities. It's not enough to think that you're the top JavaScript developer or to think, well, my mom says I'm the best. Really, are you the best? Go and take assessments. Understand where your skills lie, where your gaps are, so that you can set a learning journey. And with that, I haven't talked about my company at all, but I want to make one offer for the assessments. So I work at Pluralsight, and we have a booth here. And we have free assessments. You don't have to pay $1. You don't have to be a customer. You can test yourself on hundreds of different skills, Angular, Docker, JavaScript, the latest in AI. You can go and assess your skills and see where you stand. Are you proficient? Are you an expert? And that way it can help you really understand what kind of learning journey you need to be on. So we've also taken it a step further for roles. So if you want to know, where do I stand in terms of a front-end developer? It gives you 8 different skills to assessments that you can take to understand your overall assessment as a developer. And the offer I'd like to make to you guys is for any of you that go and take a skill assessment or start a role assessment, if you share your completion on social media using hashtag PluralsightIQ, and you come by our booth here at Salt Conference, and show it to the people at the booth, we have 100 free t-shirts. So the first 100+ people that do that, we've got free t-shirts for you. And I always love coming home with a free t-shirts from a conference. So go take your assessment. It'll help you with your learning journey and get a free t-shirt as well. So just to close this out, the folks in this room are the heroes of today's digital disruption. You are the individuals that are going to enable the skills and the ability to execute on the company's need for competitive advantage in technology. You're the disruptors. Stay sharp on your skills. Create a culture of learning for your teams. Technology is your superpower. So good luck on your journey. Thank you.